And we also had some significant changes from that point in time when we took the survey last year. Certainly, notably, COVID and those impacts on the community. We've got a new university president in place who is working diligently to increase enrollment. And we also have a growing housing, and I'll call it a crisis, in the city of Alpine. And so those are some of the things that are in front of us here at the city. And then there are certainly other ideas and thoughts as we contemplate how we see Alpine moving forward over the next 10 to 12 years. And I also thought it would just be good for us to take a step back and really think more strategically rather than the tactical items. Certainly, how we develop ordinances is very important. How we administrate within the municipal court is very important. But we also have to have that strategic vision for Alpine that we're really trying to tie in all those activities. And so I thought that was very important from kind of really setting the groundwork for today. The other thing, as I had contemplated having this workshop, I did think it was important that we looked a little bit in our rearview mirror at some of the things that we've done as a community, primarily over the last 5 to 10 years, and the trajectory and the path that's put us on. If you recall, some of you remember back in the 2015, 2016 timeframe when we gathered a group of 40 plus citizens and did quite a bit of roundtable discussion in an effort. We met over at the Centennial School a couple times in an effort to really develop a vision plan for Alpine. And that came to fruition in 2016. That was presented. There were 13 key initiatives within that vision plan. A lot of it centered around downtown Alpine and how do we make and help facilitate a more robust downtown Alpine. And we still systematically look back at those 13 initiatives and measure ourselves to a certain degree on how we're performing against those. And I think if you really look at last year's work, specifically in downtown with some of the revitalization of the alleys and really trying to help the downtown group and those business owners down there have a good venue that's attracting to not only our local community, but very attractive to the tourism community that's coming into Alpine. We've also, a couple of years ago, the Parks Committee was able to facilitate putting together the Parks Master Plan, which has now been adopted by the city. And a wonderful plan there that maps out and outlines all of the different parks within the community, as well as the different, not just city-owned parks, but other spaces that people recreate on. And within that comprehensive plan was some thoughts around what can we do to improve some of those parks. And that really laid the groundwork for some of the grant initiatives that we're working towards. And I would view that as really a success for the city of Alpine and being able to pull that together. The community has a new high school going up. There was varied points of view on whether that bond should be passed, but it did pass after a few runs at it. And that construction on the north end of the city will provide, a new, primarily new structure for the school district. Will also, provide improvements to that property. But it will also add some to the taxes of the community as well. And as a city, we always want to be cognizant of the tax rates that our citizens really fall under. And I think when we look back at the budget surveys that council members have submitted, and I've done this, I think the 3 previous years before I left, and then did it again this last year, sending a survey out to council. And one of the things we always talk about is, where do we see tax rate? Do we want it to go up, or do we want it to stay same, and only see appreciation in property as far as increased revenues? And council generally has just wanted to see us keep our tax rate the same and only see revenues relative to increased property valuations. So that being said, we have to be very careful in how we spend our money here in Alpine and some of the initiatives that we put on paper, because especially some of the higher cost ones, could potentially require some sort of bond or something of that nature. And so I also think that when we look at Alpine, we know that Sol Ross is a very, very important asset for us. It goes without saying that if we didn't have, whether it's 1,500 or 1,800 or 2,000 students there, and all the staff that supports that, if they weren't here in Alpine, the economics in Alpine would look significantly different. And with Pete Geigo going in, being installed as the 13th president, that gives, I know from my own perspective, a lot of hope that we have somebody who locally grew up in Alpine. His father was very instrumental in some of the shaping of the community, primarily with desegregation, and Pete went on to serve over 2 decades within the legislature, and then also served at the national level too. And to be willing to come back to Alpine and take on the challenge of growing not just programs, but really growing the health and the vibrancy of the student population at Sol Ross, and ensuring that we have good collaboration, if we want to use that term, back with the university, because the assets that we provide as a city and how we encourage economic development certainly helps Sol Ross State University with their recruitment efforts and bringing students here. And we have to work well with the university. I mean, we certainly rely a lot on each other. And like I said, I really have gotten to know Pete a little bit better since he's taken the realm there, and have been really pleased with watching him navigate through COVID. And one of the things I shared with somebody this last week that I think has been a significant piece that Pete has brought is that working within the student groups to help them, the student groups, grow and thrive. And I think back to the late 70s and the early 80s, Sol Ross had very strong student groups. And when you live in a community like Alpine, where you don't have the mall to go to, you don't have the discotheque and some of those things that maybe one would see in a larger community, the group settings, whether it's intramural activities, whether it's religious affiliated or just a business fraternity or a hiking club, those types of activities keep kids drawn in and focused on their studies here in Sol Ross, which ultimately retains them long term. And our businesses like Subway, McDonald's, Borders, True Value, the dollar stores, they all are heavily dependent on that student traffic and that student purchasing. So, as well as many other entities in town. So, I view those as a lot of our successes. I mean, we've had our challenges too. We certainly are more of a remote area, And so we have to think outside of the box and do things that help draw in outside dollars to the community. And those investment dollars, whether people are coming out here and buying a home to retire in, or they want to put a little boutique or a small business out here, all of that is very important to the long-term health of our community. And so with that being said, I also made a couple notes of some of the key things that were outlined in our survey last summer. Economic development plan that provides for good tourism and a good business base. How we continue to pursue grants is something that was important for our council. The role of our airport and how that airport not only provides package flow for people that order online, but also medical transport needs, as well as private pilots that come out for whether they live here or they're bringing people to hunt, fish, or vacation in this area. The Parks Master Plan was talked about heavily and by multiple councilors. And then also our non-department subsidies. And when we think about Alpine, we think about how many different groups support the health and wellness of the family unit. And like the crisis center on Highway 118 and some of the monies that we give to them every year and the important role that they play, as well as several other agencies here in the community. And of course, tax rates, I mentioned earlier, that was called out. And then one of the other pieces, and we'll get to this later in the meeting today, or this workshop, and that's really the roles of the boards and commissions. And as council thinks about that strategic vision of Alpine, how do we engage people that want to volunteer in a meaningful way? And when I think about engagement, I think about finding people that are passionate about a topic, whether it's passionate about animals and they want to be on the animal advisory board, or they're passionate about the parks and they want to be on the parks advisory board. And that passion is important because without that, unfortunately what happens is they just show up to a meeting and listen to what's on the agenda and cast a vote if necessary. And my sense is we're really wanting to recruit people that are willing to spend time researching these important topics and how they are applicable to our community in Alpine. And they really are an extension of all of you as council members. And they're your eyes and ears chasing after these topics and how they report back to you on what they find. And so I always believe that somebody shouldn't just sign up for a board or commission because they feel obligated to do it. They really should sign up because they want to do it and they want to invest time. And if at this juncture in their life they're not able to do that, that's okay. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable, but we do want to recruit people in that do see the items that we're working at from a city perspective and they're willing to engage time. So definitely want to touch and talk through that at the last part of the meeting. So that's what I have as far as my prepared remarks, if we'll call them that, just my gestation of thoughts. What I wanted to do is number one, see if there's any high-level inputs from anybody on council right now, but then also work through the roundtable on the back end of that. And I thank you, Councilor Stevens, for bringing the easel with paper. I will take copious notes as you all share some of your ideas and thoughts. I did include also in the packet the 2021 suggested priorities that I had shared at the January 5th meeting. Of course, these are not all inclusive, but more of an idea set. So with that being said, I want to open it up if there's any member of our elected official team that want to make any comments before we start looking at getting some inputs on goals and objectives.
City manager.
Yes, sir.
Under your 5-year plan and going back 5 years ago when I first got on council, there's been a great deal of improvements in our city, from streets to parks and whatnot. And a lot of it has to do with the council members being, fiduciary responsible in how we're spending our money, and also to all the volunteers that donate a lot of their time, especially like in the parks. Major improvements there, and it's a great kudos to those volunteers for adding that to our community, and gives our kids a safe place to go out and play and whatnot. So things like that, the improvements at the airport, the repaving of it has helped tremendously. I mean, the airport has really looks better than what I've ever seen it in a long time. So, things like that, major improvements. And I think we just need to continue doing those works and not let it go by the wayside. And I know in your 5-year plan, you strive for the continuation of this. So kudos to you and the council and everybody else again on this.
Other initial inputs?
Maria? Let's just go down the line. We'll start with Maria because she's to the left, and then we'll go to Chris, and then with Martine, and then with Rick. And we won't forget Betty.
Yeah, Mayor, I think Maria's gonna pass until we come back around on some of the key goals and ideas that she would like to see accomplished in Alpine. Chris, any initial thoughts to share?
Not right off.
Okay. Betty?
No.
No. Martine?
Let's see, fire hydrants. We had a contract last year that they did some of Ward 4. Was that a 1-year contract or grant, or what was it?
That was a CDBG grant, yes, sir. It was to improve the ability to respond to fires in the southeast part of the community.
Some grants, I got one right there in front of my house.
And certainly, our ISO ratings and our fire preparedness are important elements, not only for safety and security within the community, but also as we think about our insurance rates, as we get ranked and rated. I mean, those are all the things that those teams are going to look at as they rate us, which ultimately ends up in our insurance premiums. Rick?
So I'm never bashful, I just thought I'd be polite and wait for everyone else. Well, I think it's exactly the right thing to go do. I think clearly, and I'll echo the mayor's comments about all the great work that's been done over the last, since I've been on council, and continuing down that path is important. Having this discussion with 2 new council members on board, and as you pointed out, what's going on from a COVID standpoint and the university president, this is the ideal time to be able to have this discussion so we continue to stay aligned. I think I'm not sure if the mayor come on board yet when the vision plan for downtown is put together or not, but certainly that's been a great roadmap, and I think one of the outcomes ought to be that as we look through these priorities, go look at what the implications are for the downtown vision plan, and really think about creating a broader plan for the city, so that we really have a document we can refer back to that allows us to continue to go forward as members of council transition. Because it helps keep actions moving in the same direction. So I would hope that would be one of the things we go up there. We don't need to go hire, anyone to come in and go do that update, but I think having a document similar to that refers back to our strategies and our funding priorities and what I'll call philosophical items are important. For example, the philosophical item that you raised, at least since I've been on council, council has only looked at opportunities from a revenue standpoint out of taxes to be based upon increase of property values, not changing tax rates. And I would continue to support that. I think it's an important discussion to have for council to have. Because in my opinion, there is never enough money to meet all of the needs. And when we force ourselves to live within a certain tax rate, we have to make decisions about what our priorities are. And that's what enables us to be, fiscally sound. I know right now, the total tax rate for $100 value on property in the city is $2.35 per $100. That's gone up significantly. And it's not been driven by the city nor the county, but it has been driven by the school district. One can argue to the cows come home, that's the right there or not. But the fact is, we are part of the responsibility of keeping tax rates affordable, because as property values continue to go up, that's where we get the additional revenue that we want to get. And I just think the city's going to face pressure downstream if the school board decides they need to go do something at a different facility. We get some hard decisions to make as a community how to go work that. So I do think maintaining tax rate from a city perspective is an important strategic concept that we align around. And then we'll budget decisions. So those are my comments.
Any comments from any council member?
Yeah, so Mayor, one of the things that I was also thinking about, and Rick brought up the revenue side, thinking outside of the box, we primarily from a city on our general fund, we look at sales tax and we look at property tax.
Yep.
Certainly the fees that we receive in municipal court, but those are negligible compared to our sales tax and property tax. There are other ways for us to grow revenue,
Yep.
Whether it's through developing some public-private partnerships through housing initiatives. Certainly next year, our trash contract comes up.
Yep.
And being able to bring that in-house, potentially keep the same waste rate, but lower the cost to deliver and take that extra amount and reinvest that back into the city is certainly another idea. And that's part of what I want to make sure that we're working on as well, as some of these additional revenue streams that we could create to help fund and fuel the city. And other ideas outside of just those two.
Well, as you think about, so we sell water, we sell trash services, we sell natural gas. Those are all revenue generators. And that's, I think, an important part as council looks at the budget for next year, this whole notion about what's the revenue stream and where do we need to be from a market standpoint, and what are the revenue opportunities to come out of that, because they fund the other parts. And I'm a believer in use tax. You use more, you gotta pay more for it. You don't use as much, manage it, you go a part of it. And so I think there's an opportunity there for for council to contemplate when budget comes around in the May-June cycle, to look and say, what does that look like? Because it certainly has been to the benefit of the taxpayers to take advantage of those services that get consumed. It also, in my view, provides some motivation for people to conserve those resources as well.
Right.
If we, I love what Adelina's done with the recycling center. The more we put there, the less goes in the garbage, the less goes in the trash. And so I think there is a good discussion about how you manage, if we each get a $96 or 96 gallon bin, it's a whole lot different than if I throw my trash into a doggone dumpster. It doesn't matter which dumpster I throw it in, I'm gonna fill it up as fast as I can because there's no issue there. But I think those are the sorts of things for people to think about. Water reclamation. As little rain as we get, there's still, water recycle opportunities. And I've got 18,000 gallons of water storage just to be able to handle that. From my outside irrigation, it certainly cuts down on my water bill. But I think those are the sorts of things that's worthwhile talking about and have lots more discussions for people to engage on. And there's good models out there.
Let me ask another question for council. So we think about city-county relationship in Brewster County, Alpine. Other communities that I've either lived in or viewed and observed, there are, I'll just call it more significant services that the county provides to the individual cities. Parks and Rec is one, and streets is another that I can think of off the top of my head. That's not, since I've been a city manager, it's not been a topic that we've pursued heavily in relationship with the county. But how do we think our citizens feel if you're paying, for example, into the county, into the road and bridge fund, and you're paying city taxes and there's no work or limited work coming out of that? And is that something that we should even be contemplating long term? Obviously, we know our relationship with the county is not where we would like it to be. We have issues with putting people in the jail, things of that nature. But how do we maybe take an all-encompassing view and say, this is where we want to elevate that relationship with the county, and there are certain things that could be drawn in that would eliminate some costs from the city that could be redirected into other activities.
I think it would do us a lot of good if we could work on that relationship. Take the streets, for example, using county, I mean, I'm not even talking funds or anything, but being able to help each other, like equipment, loaning of equipment to the city or something like that. Their employees trying to help out. I think if we did it together instead of trying to do it separate, that might save some money altogether.
Maybe that's too far.
Chris, I think you hit the nail on the head about the cooperation, and I think that's what we need to have a stronger communication between the city and the county, and that goes back to our liaisons from the county and the city. Having face-to-face meetings and then reporting back, either have one of the county representative come before the city council and tell us what's on their agenda and how we could improve these relationships, and vice versa, from the city going to county commissioners court. I know we had an issue a while back when we needed someone to train one of our street graders. We had no one when we had a retirement. There was no one to operate it. So we had to bring one of our old retirees back. And I think, you know, if we would have had that relationship, we could have used the county to train some of our folks in how to use that equipment. And it would have been probably at no cost to us.
My thoughts, relationships have to be mutually beneficial. And at least as the almost 7 years I've been on council, there has not been a perspective of mutual benefit. And until there's a sense of mutual beneficiality going back and forth, I find it difficult to establish a relationship. And, you know, it's based upon people and perspectives, but it's not clear to me that there is a sense about common vision and common perspective. And part of it ties to the city's budget is more than double what the county's budget is, more than double. Okay, our budget, $14.7 million, the county, not even half that. And until such time as there's alignment about priorities and expectations, are there opportunities to share? I don't think there's any doubt about it. But I find it difficult to believe because we just haven't seen it yet. And who's the one that initiated the outreach to the county, going back to when Julian was on council? It was the city. And it started, and then Fitz picked up, and it's better. It's dead. There's nothing there. So there really has to be, in my view, a willingness to have the dialogue, and I know we're going to talk about this in the regular council meeting. It's really reflected in the whole city-county jail relationship, where there was an agreement, and we can't even get the judge, the city manager, the city chief, and the sheriff to sit down and have a discussion. And so I think it's exactly the right thing to go do, but it's got to work both ways. And so that is an important element. And frankly, it's not clear to me the county sees the value in a relationship. And again, we're going to talk about this. Frankly, the strategy that I see them employing, because I listened to the whole last commissioner's court meeting on what's going on in the jail. Well, their strategy to get out of the issue with us in the jail is not to talk to us. They want to go float a bond to build a new jail. That's their strategy. And we're going to wait for the next 3 years for that to sort through. And meanwhile, there are still no discussions. And so I think we as council ought to make a statement that we really are looking for a mutually beneficial relationship with the county. And my sense is the county needs to make the same statement. Until that occurs, I find it difficult to believe that we're going to get there. And it all goes back to this 5-letter word, trust. And I think there's a huge lack of trust and mutual respect between the two. I didn't say it, but that's what my answer is.
Excuse me, Mayor. I lost
Yes.
your camera, Mayor.
You lost my camera?
Yeah, I don't see it on my end.
Okay, there we go. How about that?
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay. That's, I think we'll work it, we'll make that as a goal and objective.
Right.
We have a long ways to go.
Good. Well, but I do like the idea of at least starting with a letter that we do aspire to have a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
And map out 3 priorities or 5 priorities to go work between the city and the county. We don't have to go work on 20 things at once.
Yeah, then come on.
But at least we've made it known that the city is willing.
Yes, we have tried interoperability agreements on emergency management, West Texas Ambulance, right now, there are two separate activities, and never the twain shall meet. We've tried to get codified what's going on from the jail standpoint, doesn't exist. We've tried to talk about including the county discussion about the airport. And there's actually required by the FAA, because the land outside the airport, as you approach the runways, is county property, there needs to be a joint group, two from the county, two from the city, to go worry about that from the building code standpoint. It's in the city, extraterritorial jurisdiction. We can't get two members from the county to participate. So meanwhile, the good news is, I don't think anyone's gonna build a high-rise building out in the approach to runway 19 or 23, but if they did, we'd have to force that issue. There's no mechanism for doing that review. Those are three examples where there's been an outreach on the part of the city to the county, and there's no one answering the phone on the other end. So I think writing the letter is probably the best next step to try and see what happens. And I really think that it needs to be an element that the electorate says, hey, we want to elect people to the commissioner's court and the city council who are willing to support those objectives.
Yeah, because I do think, every year that we have elections, and certainly every year the city has elections, and every other year the county does.
Yeah.
Having citizens that are interested in that and signing up to work towards that commonality, especially in such a, as we're more remote,
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
we really need that coordination.
Yeah, and I tell you, I just said I could chair the Brewster County Appraisal Assessment District Board. We have 7 taxing agents on there. The county, and Momar represents the county. Mary represents the school district. I mean, we all get together, work through our stuff. We are aligned because we're all focused on exactly the same objective. And I think that's the important element about how boards like that work. It's about mutually beneficial objectives. And we work very well together. We've had protests, we've had legal suits, we have all sorts of things against us. And we all come together, work our way through, come up with something that makes sense. Thus far, the county and the city don't have that yet. We gotta have this common, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say common enemy, but common objective. And we're still struggling with that.
On the letters that have gone out to the county before, have any of the commissioners responded? Are we not getting, not even a reply from any of them?
No, in the last large grouping information I sent out was relative to the emergency management workshop that we hosted in August. And I sent that to all of the county commissioners and the judge. And I did not hear back from any of the county commissioners after multiple emails on that. Also shared with them just prior to that, the preliminary issues we were seeing in the jail, and did not get a response from any of the county commissioners relative to that reach out. So I hope I haven't offended any of them. I'm just not accustomed to reaching out and not hearing back. I'm fine if they just tell me to pound sand. I just assume to hear. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not. I'd like to just have the discussion about the topics as they come up.
And that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be a personal thing, whether they like you or not, or whether they like your approach or not, shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, and I really, all of those communications, my goal is always to bring that back to council so that you all have the benefit of that information. And we certainly like to bring people in from a presentation standpoint too, to present and discuss with council issues that come up.
I think Jim Westerman is the closest we've seen in a while.
Yep.
He represents most of us who live in the city. Jim and I, we have a good dialogue going back and forth. I think there's an opportunity there that he might be a change in perspective, and I would hope the county would say, since the city is mostly within his jurisdiction, that might be a way to work it. I don't know. I can never remember where the county lines get drawn up and everything else, but at least from my ward, Jim fits in.
One of the other things I wanted to make sure that we touched on today was people's perspective on annexation as well. I think middle of last year, we sent out a map that showed a few things, but we certainly were very busy on a lot of other topics last year, other than pursuing annexation. But we do have some communities adjacent to Alpine that if the city wanted to really start pursuing annexation, we could pick up a couple of these smaller little subdivisions and bring them in from the city perspective. What's everybody's thoughts on annexation?
So I'll talk about from Ward 5 perspective. I think that when we think about annexation, we have to think about the value add for someone paying an extra 55 cents for $100 value in the property tax. Where I live, I have a neighbor right next to my property that is in the county, who, when the annexation occurred before I showed up, made a specific point of fighting annexation and got a carve out. So where I live, you think all the way going across the Sulross, everything is part of the city. It is not. So there are those questions that people raise. I think the other is we as a city, long before any of us were around, I think did a lousy job on the annexation process. In Ward 5 going out east on 6790, all I got annexed in. Alpine Technical Estates got annexed in. From a city perspective, those headed east on 6790, the city benefited from that, but they got no value out of it. That was one of the biggest complaints I got when coming on council. Hey, you annexed us in, we were thinking we're gonna get sewer and water, we got none of it. And other than, if we have water, we pay reduced rates, but if you wanted to have sewer, the city's gonna charge us a ton of money. It's not that there should have been any surprises about that in terms of the annexation plan. The city just did a lousy job of having the discussion. Then you throw in Alpine Country Club Estates. That was a favor to someone because we have 10% of the city roads we're responsible for, and there's not anywhere near the amount of base. And my put would be, I just assume disannex the Alpine Country Club Estates, and maybe that'll be my last gasp on city council, because it won't matter, is the push for de-annexation. I don't know the legal rules associated with that, but in my view, it's unfortunate that we've got 10% of our roads, and if you consider what it takes to maintain it, in order to maintain that road, and it is, because I drive it every other week, it's in struggle right now. The main road going out there is probably $1 million to upgrade it. And in theory, we ought to be spending $100,000 a year as a minimum to maintain that. And as soon as you do that for 29 homes compared to the other 2,500 residents we have in Alpine, I can't justify spending that money. And it's in my ward. So that's, I think, where it makes good business sense, we ought to have that discussion. I think we have to up our game significantly before we go annex anyone. It would have to give them good reason to the point where they'd say, I'd really like to be part of the city because I won't pay my 55 cents additional property tax to be able to do that. So those are my thoughts. I should probably be quiet.
I think when I look at the folks that live in the county but close proximity to the city, having to pay 50% more for the water and sewer can be costly if you're using a lot of city water. The one piece that I struggle with is we don't mandate trash collection from the county. And so we only have a little over 60 people that are county paying for trash. We all see them driving in and dumping off at dumpsters. And so that piece of it, I think if as we navigate through the trash, if we move from a dumpster methodology to the polycart methodology, that will solve itself. But then I agree, I think if we're gonna look deeper at annexation, and to me, this is something that when we think about planning and zoning commission, this is where we want our planning and zoning commission and those members leading the information gathering and the discussions and having the meetings. And then putting together a service plan, because in the state of Texas, to annex, you're required to have that service plan that talks about utilities and not being passive on what the city had done previously that said, hey, we're gonna annex you, everything's gonna be great. And nobody really read in the service plan that it said, you can now procure city utilities at the ordinance rate, which meant that you paid for all the line extensions and things of that nature. I think, having that value proposition discussion up front would be healthy. And we as a city, if we've got some abilities to invest in certain areas and lay things out, once again, I also think, not just our P&Z involvement there, but then also as we look at what I call the big elephant that's growing, and that's affordable housing. And how we use the outskirts of town, whether it's perimeter already in the city or it's stuff that's in the county, and working back with development of that and getting proper infrastructure in there, utilities in there, streets, roads, and then maybe tying in other developments that are on the edge of the city that would be logical to annex, implement that type of infrastructure during that same period of time too.
Yeah, I think, Eric, one of the things that, and maybe planning and zoning is probably the right board and commission to go work at, is to almost do the business model for why, at what point annexation would work or not work, and then use that as the basis to look at property that's around Alpine to integrate this affordable housing concept. I just did a back of the envelope assessment that says if you have $100,000 piece of property, it's gonna cost you an extra $557 per year for taxes. Okay, so if you're able to save $600 on water bill, on whatever else, because you're now part of the city, it's a no-brainer. You go for annexation, you support them.
Right.
And I think that business model would be so helpful, because right now it tends to be more emotional. I don't want to be part of the city, well, here's the business facts. And I don't know what the average water bill is nowadays. I'm an admiration for water bills, but if anyone wants to share their water bill, I just say it's $50 a month for a water bill. So that's $600 a year. If you live outside the city, it's $900. So you're $300 towards a $600 element. You go over the other $600 for $300. It's a good business deal. People say, I want to be annexed. And that's where you almost want P&Z to look and say, hey, we've done an evaluation here, here, and here. We pulled water bills, average rates, we pulled property values, average rates, we pulled this, and based upon that, if you became part of the city, it's a better deal to be part of the city. Now people say, oh, I want to be part of the city. I think that ought to be council's strategy, is put the business model together so people say, I'd rather be part of the city rather than what happened last time. We're going to annex you because we want your money. It just looks like we're money grubbers, which we are.
I think it's a good idea to give them the option. I think a lot of people would be put off by the amount of money it costs initially to get the sewer tap put in and their water tap put in and all that stuff, get the meter and stuff put in. So that's a decision that they can make, saying, well, it's costs money now, but it'll pay for itself in 3 years, right?
Well, and the city may want to say, if you're part of the city for the first year, or for the first 2 years, the city's willing to cover those costs. Now, that's an investment in the near term that enables people to get involved, that you get paid back, because that payback's gonna happen relatively quickly. So in my view, that's part of this whole business model about what things can look like. And then council can make an informed decision about what they will do or not. In my opinion, had the city back when 67, 90 was annexed in, if they'd said for 3 years, we're gonna give you the following rate, not at normal rates, but at a discounted rate, I bet people would have said, I'm in, throw it in. And then you get all bundled together, you dig the sewer out, they're all set, you got the water going, it would save them immeasurably in the long term. There's most of them are businesses out there. They're the business owners. It's real simple for them. What's my return? So I think that business, now thinking about representatives on planning and zoning,
Right.
I really think you want someone who understands how to run a business on P's. And I don't think we have that right now. We almost want to make that a requirement, and the council want to think about, what are the skills we need on our respective boards and councils? We want a business person on this one. We want aviators on this one. We want animal experts on this one. We want environmental experts on this one. You just go through the list and say, hey, we're going to require an large number of all abilities. And I think that would help them all a lot. And then when we do the training, the training for our members, well, we start making a difference in the way that people say, oh, okay, I get this. I'm just a dumb business guy, tries to look at finances, and so then maybe really work. Okay, in my opinion, you mentioned passion is an important part of being on a board and commission. I think passion and skills are an important part of being on a board and commission. There's not a board that I sit on that we don't recruit people based upon passion and their skills. And we're doing the same thing. Nice vote.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that right now with our planning and zoning commission, that's probably our most important commission to really refresh and set down and really have almost a working session with them as we come out of our meeting today and think about delineation of the skill sets that are needed for each. Maybe let's put a priority on planning and zoning and pulling those folks together, because I know I mentioned on the other note there, affordable housing.
Yep.
I am getting, that's probably the #1 call that's coming into my office
Yeah.
now. People just struggle with whether it's hiring people because we just can't pay enough to afford a $800 or $900 a month 1-bedroom place.
Yep.
And we do have a lot of people from outside of Alpine, so Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, New York, California, that are looking at wanting to buy second and third homes here. So they're coordinating heavily with the realtors when things pop up. They're looking at them and wanting to use them and rent them out as a short-term rental when they're not here. That's continuing to pull housing out of the market. And if we don't have acceleration, more units going in and replacing what's being lost, then it just continues to become untenable.
So Eli and I have mentored a young lady named Shadida Perkins, who's been to Alpine before, been with her for the last, this will be going on 10 years. We met her in Chicago, got through school, we met her all the way through that, and things transitioned in Chicago, so we brought her to Alpine. There's only 2 locations we could find a 1-bedroom place. One was a single wide trailer, and the other was Alpine Heights, and that was it. Now, thank goodness that Alpine Heights is in my ward, so I've gotten to know it probably more than I should or want to at times. But I'm gonna put a commercial in for Alpine Heights. That place used to be a disaster. Drugs, alcohol, you name it, tough issue. I'll give Tammy Alvarado great credit, she's cleaned that place up. And it's actually a nice place. Now, I know who built it. It was built as originally student dormitories, way back when it was Sol Ross Village. Because I know Neville Haynes and a partner built the doggone thing. It is indestructible, but you can't beat the rates. 5 and a quarter plus utilities, so it's under $600 a month. You get a cinder block place to live in. So is it great? For Chiquita, it's working out fine, but there are no other places. There are nothing else. And so as we council approved the place out at the Hampton Inn for Paresh to put in those 2 trailers, there's no place for his workers to live. They took the one out at All Lane Express, I didn't need variance. He put them in out there. That's a huge issue. And so to your point, the challenge, and I've been trying to do some back of the envelope, what do you have to put in place to make it work? I know that out of what you did, they put in the 49 units.
Right.
I don't think without support at a government level, you can actually afford to put something in and break even at it. That's the struggle. And you're certainly not going to make it out of a concrete block. And people want the nice amenities and all that, but making it towards affordable. I had 65 units I was going to build in California and backed away from it just because all of the ground. I do think we need some time to go think about that and really do the business model. And again, it goes back to P&Z, really thinking about what that looks like. And I think we've got some work to do to come back to council with some recommendations. Again, I look at the additional revenue that city would get out of property taxes at the tax rate under which it works and making it a public-private partnership, not in terms of the investment side, but the city working with who's going to put it in a way that's mutually financially beneficial.
Right.
That's the challenge.
And that comes back to also needing the business plan
Yep.
on that.
Yep.
You know, I also wonder, just thinking out loud, many years back, there were several 4-plexes and 6-plexes being built in Alpine for an owner-occupied type model.
Yep.
And is that something that we could really delve into? Because then you start, if you create 6 or 8 different templates of that,
Yep.
You then get somebody who's willing to bring their own money to the table, get the financing,
Yep.
But then have rentable units. Now, I think one of the pieces that planning and zoning will also have to look at is spatial requirements, lot sizes. How dense can you go to minimize maintenance for people? Because that's the other piece when we think about Alpine. I mean, our minimum lot size on a single family home, 7,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Well, you know, a lot of cities, they're at 5,000, 5,500.
Yep.
And some even smaller than that. And getting more dense housing allows for somebody who might be willing to buy a bigger piece of property, they can get more units on it, and be able to make them after the business plan work.
Well, and then tying it back to the parks and recreation for kids. Right. Because they tend to be younger families, you know, more than a single adult who want to have kids, but they got a place for the kids to play. And so the parks and the proximity is another important part of how that all ties together.
Correct. And that's where my sense is, if we had that public-private partnership, we would lay that out in a way that, you know, for every 40 living units or whatever, there's some level of spacing that they can go to throw the ball, throw the frisbee, recreate a little bit. But build it out in a way where we have individuals investing in it and not trying to draw somebody out of Dallas or Houston that's got larger dollars. I know in speaking with David Hale, he has talked to some of the apartment construction companies in Dallas. None of them are interested in Alpine at all.
Yeah, I run the models, they don't work. But I do think, there's some places over in Ward 4, which I think would be ideal for that, given the park proximity and looking at where some opportunities might be.
Right. Well, Jackie Bowe, Joshua, her husband, they've got 22 acres right there, a couple blocks east of Pueblo Nuevo Park.
Okay.
And they certainly would be ones that would engage in this type of concept or this type of development, I'm sure.
So an opportunity.
City Manager, have we looked at the property off Ted Road? It's in that ETJ just west of the Toronto Estates. There's probably 20 acres there that have been vacant for some time. That's where they were at one time considering putting the nursing home at.
Yeah, Mayor, that's a good location as well. Charlie Weissman has some property just to the west of Highway 118. He's got about 5 acres just off of Harriet Street.
Okay.
And then going to the north there, that's another good location. And then I think Jackie and Joshua's properties, they're all already close proximity to city
That's
utilities.
what you want. That's an important element.
Keep the costs down.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, that property that was going to belong to the nursing home was donated by the Posey Trust.
Right.
And when the nursing home did not make, it defaulted back to the Posey Trust. It went back to the Posey family because that's what the parents wanted it to be a nursing home. And we could never get anyone to support it or get letters of support, so it defaulted back to the family.
Okay.
It was
I wonder is that,
17 acres.
what's that?
It was 17 acres. And
17 acres.
And it did have infrastructure.
Yeah, it's got structure right there on Fort Davis.
Yes,
You
sir.
got sewer in there, you got power and water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe that might be an option to reach out to them because the land just sitting, it's been sitting there for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
So shifting a little bit away from affordable housing to economic development and some of the business development. We certainly have, with Bob Ward, a very good flagship business. McCoy's continues to deliver well. I think early returns on Tractor Supply have been, they've been well received. We do have another Dollar General, so there'll be 2 Dollar Generals of Family Dollar. That's that new one going in across from the university. That building is going to be a second Dollar General.
I guess I didn't leave the house enough. I don't know where
Yeah, the
that's at.
slab's poured, building started going up.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay, I know, I
Yeah,
guess I have
It's on
those.
the way out of town. Good at these.
Oh, no, okay, good.
Used to be the old detail and shop and also old Texaco.
I better keep my daughter, I wonder if she's asking me if it's gonna be a Hooters. What? Where are you getting that? She's like, I keep hearing people are talking this.
I'll line
But
up.
I'll tell her it's
I'll place
a Dollar General.
There you go. Whole different content.
But what, as you think about it, I know I get people that approach me about certainly HEB as a grocer. Would there ever be a potential of them coming here? The Porter's model, they certainly give a lot to the community, and I would never want to discount their philanthropic efforts. I will also say that the store leaves a lot to be desired. Both their stores do. And we do continuously hear people of shopping outside of Alpine whenever possible. And, how do we bring some of that shopping back into Alpine? It's nice to see Blue Water open again. That's kept some dollars here. But what are some of the other businesses that that maybe we're missing out on that we really need to be thinking about?
And you got you that just moved into Pecos, just right there by I-10. You got the Walmart, and then you've got United, just opened up here about maybe 3-4 months ago.
What was that?
United Grocery,
United Grocery, okay.
that just opened up in Pecos, and they're only, what, maybe 90 miles away from us? So the footprint's getting closer. I know when I talked to the HEB folks, they said that they just did not have enough, what was it they called? They didn't have the footprint close enough to us, so they would be going out of their way this way. So they, we weren't going to be considered, and that was just last year when they sent me a letter on that.
Eric, I have a question. If they start pulling the produce out of Mexico and have to transport through here, would that not give us an option for them to do drop-offs here and open a store since they're having to come through here to pick up?
I brought that up, Cynthia, to HEB,
Uh-huh.
that we were going to have that fresh produce coming in from Mexico, because that's one of the things that the rail was going to be meant for, is light industrial products and produce. But they still said no, that'd be just a little isolated pocket there, and still not enough. It's not viable for us. But I'm looking at maybe United, because they're closer now, and you do have that railhead right there at Fort Stockton. We don't have a place for them to stop here in Alpine other than the little terminal, right there on Del Rio.
Who's United? I've never heard of them.
They're owned by, it's an old store. They're owned by Albertsons. They got bought out by Albertsons.
Oh, okay.
It's a big grocery chain.
A friend and her daughter works at an HEB. She's doing the manager stuff to do HEB, and she's in Austin right now, I think. And she was saying that HEB was considering putting a distribution point in Odessa or Midland. That they were considering doing it there or somewhere else. I can't remember the other place, but so that might be something to talk about later if that does happen, because they'll be much closer. I don't know.
Yeah, see, and I tried that because I'd heard that they're going to probably build another HEB there, but they said it was still out of their way to come down here for this area. And I gave them all the towns that would.
They already have them there, but they were going to do where they have the big shipping from out of there.
Right.
Yeah, because Odessa has 2 stores now, one on the west and one on the east side.
Yeah, and they're getting to put another one. There's a Costco going up there also. And was it down Snyder? Trying to think, just east of Midland, there's an HEB there also on I-10.
Oh,
But,
Sweetwater,
but we had sent a letter to him. I had a friend that had personal contact with him. It took him a while to get back, and I finally received the email saying that it's not viable for them at this time.
Here's an important question in my mind. What's our vision for Alpine? Okay, and so there are a lot of pluses and a lot of minuses living in Alpine. We talked about the grocery business. If an HEB were to come in here, what are the potential implications for the rest of what I'll call the infrastructure here in Alpine? If a Walmart were to come in here, that's a whole different set of infrastructure. What happens to our businesses? And what do we want to happen to our businesses? I for one, am not interested in having Walmart come anywhere close to Alpine. I'm just not bashful about that. I moved to Alpine to get away from all that. And so I think that's really an important strategic question about what's the vision of Alpine. As I think about and having installed facilities and businesses when I worked for Boeing, we put a 10,000 person plant in Charleston, South Carolina. And the reason we did that is there was labor there. And frankly, we struggle with the labor pool to be able to meet our current needs. I don't know a retail organization, a restaurant, a hotel, a contractor. I don't know anyone who's not looking for qualified, quality help. There are certainly people working in locations, but we really struggle filling the needs of people, of the businesses. And so I think that's one of the important elements, is before we think about what businesses we want to bring in, how do we make sure the businesses here can thrive economically, to be able to meet the needs with the skill set of people, and then how do we retain people here? And then how big do we want to be? Do we want to be Pecos? I mean, so I was just up at Pecos, so Elaine and I were up there on Saturday or Sunday. And we have been driving around Pecos in quite some time. Pecos has got huge in terms of what's out there. Why? Gas and oil. And they got, lots of stuff there. But Elaine's comment was, and I'll admit Elaine's bias, she says, I like the downtown Alpine a whole lot better than I like the downtown Pecos, and I would agree. So I don't know what the answer is, and I don't have one. I'm just throwing a question out that'll be good for council to think about. What's the right dialogue? What are we as a community about? Are we about trying to maximize the tourists that come here as a pass-through, or participate in what goes on our Alpine for our art, for our environment, for the quiet city, for being able to go to the Big Bend? Or are we after some industry to go here? And how do we support our businesses through the right process? This goes back to planning and zoning. If someone says, hey, I want to do the following, do we have the right mechanism in place? But it's got to be based on a vision about where we want to go. And I don't know, I'm one voice, so I don't speak for everyone. But people tend to like Alpine because it's nice and quiet and cozy.
It makes me think, are we better off solving for the affordable housing as our priority? Because it doesn't matter how much economic growth we have, if there's no place for them to live that's affordable, they're going to continue to sputter out. And do we really prioritize the housing piece, knowing that there will be business growth and lift from that for our existing contractors, builders, plumbers, electricians, those within the area, and we can help them continue to solve. I know talking to Kirsten Moody earlier today, some of the thought process up at the university, and I know some of what Pete is trying to empower with like Nixon and Eric Busby up there has been around that industrial arts, technology, skill development. I think Busby teaches some home building classes. I think Keith Nixon participates in that. And all of those journeyman trade that go along with it could then be tied into that housing initiative, which would also feed housing for university students, but then also for workers for existing businesses that are here today.
Well, here is, in my mind, a really strong opportunity to partner with the county. What does the city lack that the county has? Land. Okay. What is it that the city and county have in common? People like to come visit us, not because we're a big city, we're a pretty rural, rustic area. And so this would be, in my mind, a strategic perspective. Brewster County, whether we say it's Alpine or the county, is in fact a tourist destination and the gateway into the Big Bend region. That's who we are. Whether it's our short-term rentals, whether it's housing that is spread out. You want to go to see the far west Texas? Go out and you can build a 5-acre ranch out in the middle of nowhere. Okay? But having the trades to be able to support that, that enables a vibrant community here in Alpine. It enables support for the university. It enables people to be able to sell land. And it supports the construction industry. It also supports the ranch community, which is an important part of what we got going on. If we are in fact rural Texas, well, I think everything moves along nicely, because as I mentioned, I'm not in favor, I've lived in enough big cities around the world. I mean, they're wonderful, but I didn't come to Alpine to live in Sydney, Australia, or Washington DC, or Seattle, or Chicago, or LA, or anything. I came to live in West Texas, and I'm not away from everyone else. And we can still have a really strong, vibrant economy based upon that. And we look at trades and capabilities. Well, I just think that's a huge blessing that we can create without being a big city. You know, that's a strategy. If our planning and zoning worked around that, if we worked with the county on that as a strategy,
Right.
what's the motivation of the county? Revenue,
Absolutely.
tax base.
Absolutely.
Because they don't have the sales opportunities that go on in the city. Theirs is all based on tax revenue.
Right.
And if they can get the tax revenue out of people who are willing to build, you know, $1 million places or bed and breakfast places or whatever, the county's gonna get benefit. Because the way in which, you may or may not be aware of this from a tax standpoint, we our assessors tax based upon property values if you live in a home. But places that are used, they get rent out, get taxed based upon the revenue they generate, not the cost of the unit. So for example, Holiday Inn Express, their tax base is based upon their revenue generated, not what it costs to build a building. And as the revenue goes up, the tax base goes up. And that's a really important element, and I would think the county would say hallelujah if we could support that, and that's maybe a strategy to go work. And you know, they got a whole bunch of land downstream that are down county that might work. We have the skills to be able to go build that. Anyway,
Eric, a few years ago, we used to contract between the county, the city, and the district. And Pete Gallegos actually trying to bring back the nursing program. We used to bring people in from all area to come do the nursing program here, and they would stay in Alpine. They would build a home, they would do the properties, and they would make Alpine their home. Dr. Billings came and did his rotations here, and he stayed in Alpine. Since then, the last board with the district has dissolved their pharmacy, and Marfa has dissolved funding the medical program so that these doctors can come in and do the rotations here. And they dissolved the nursing program at Saros. Now, Pete has put that in place, but if we put all that back in and we got the county, the city, and the university to jump in as a team, we would get all these people to stay here, and we would get the enrollment at Saros to come back up, and we could work together as a team.
That's the nursing program. Dr. Kevler had already established that before he left. And actually they have a building right there off Loop Road. That's going to be the nursing classroom, which is fantastic because there is a shortage of nursing, but there's also a big lack of people in the building trade. I mean, you call an electrician, a plumber, or a carpenter, it takes forever to get that. And some of these folks that are moving in, they're hiring contractors from elsewhere to come and build their homes.
My nephew's girlfriend came here because they promised her a nursing program here. She was here 6 years and that program never happened. She had to go back to San Antonio to finish her program.
Well, that's should have started. I don't know if it started yet or not, but they had acquired the building for the nursing program to go forward.
Yeah, Pete Gallego has put a lot of work into that to make it happen again.
So, but there again, you got to have builders, qualified, licensed builders, which we're lacking. Okay, and some of that, if the university and the high school would get together and establish a program that would migrate from high school into the university. Okay, and perhaps even a 2-year program where these kids could come out and have experience and they could go and work for a legitimate contractor and, and then earn their journeyman and their master's and move forward and perhaps start their own business. That's what's lacking. I
Yeah.
mean, it took me months to get an electrician for a simple little job, and finally I got in, and then I needed some more work and he was gone. He was busy. So that's something that we need to look at to collaborate with the university is, we need to have these programs come back to Alpine because our youth here is going elsewhere and they're getting frustrated because they're away from home and whatnot. And then they drop out of college and then they're back here working as general labor. So that's something that we need to address, through the university also, to partner with.
But we need to work together. They see us, not being able to work together. They don't want to be a part of that if we don't work together. That's why they're moving away.
Right, correct. You're absolutely right. And right now there was a bill introduced into the Texas Senate where perhaps A&M would pick up Sul Ross, okay, because they tend to have the same curriculum, and I think A&M would probably have more to offer us, out here. So that's something that we need to look at, and whether it gets passed in this session or not, we don't know. But if it doesn't, they're going to try again in 2 more years to do that. But we need to make that college more vibrant to attract more students here. In the 80s, we had 2,000 enrollment. Now I don't know what we have now, but you look at the parking lot and it's bare.
Yeah, but we need to let our president, let's give him a chance. He's only been here, what, 6
Oh, yeah.
months? He
Yeah,
came
but-
in at a really big
COVID, and just to finish up on the healthcare side of things, I think beyond just the opportunities with the nursing program, something I'll definitely talk with Pete about is those down channel licenses, medical assistant, and ratchet up from there. We've got a lot of local businesses. I think about the clinics, I think about the hospital. You think about the home health, like Agave Home Health. They may only need a certified medical assistant to work for them instead of a full-blown 4-year degree nurse. And
Right.
having that drop-off point for students as well. Because if you've got that program already at the school, you just pass the certain classes you need and then take your certification test.
Get your LDM versus your DLM.
Right. And Pete needs, Cynthia, Pete needs the tools also, to make it work. And I think right now he's liking those tools and it's making it harder on him coming in new. But, he needs to be given tools also, monies and I think a bigger umbrella, which he can utilize to make this college grow.
Right.
It's because right now, he's got a big weight on his shoulder with, really no support, out here.
I have a question, Mayor. So tell me, what happens if he doesn't meet the numbers? Then what happens with A&M? What are they going to do to us?
Well, here's the thing that right now, our grades are one of the lowest in the state. Okay. And I was talking to one of the professors out there. He says, I was going to retire this year. Now I can't. I got to wait another 2 more years because there's nobody to replace me. So, we need to give him, some tools, a bigger umbrella with monies that'll support him.
Yeah, I understand that, but what happens if we don't meet the expectations of Texas A&M? What's going to happen to our university?
Well, so I'm saying right now, we're not meeting it.
But it's
We're not
our
meeting it.
university,
Yeah, it's our university, but it's not really ours. It's under the Texas State umbrella right now.
Mhm.
Okay.
But our numbers are never going to be anywhere close to San Angelo, which they're comparing us to.
I didn't catch that, Chris.
I said, but our numbers, enrollment numbers are never gonna be what they wanna see. Comparing San Angelo to Alpine is just comparing apples and oranges.
But, if we can offer more curriculum, it'll draw in more students. Right now, our curriculum has been cut quite a bit. The geology department has gone out, out the road. The ag has been cut down, there's so many programs that have been cut out. So why should a student come out here if that's all you're going to offer me? If you had a bigger curriculum, then more students would look at an opportunity to come out here. We're the cheapest university as far as tuition in the state. So that's a plus right there already. But we got to have the curriculum to go along with it.
So we can debate this till the cows come home, but there's no one in this room or this discussion who knows what's going on with Saul Ross. If there's an action we would take, my view is we ought to invite Pete Diego to come have a discussion with us. So I'd rather not debate about whether there's something there or not there. Let's ask Pete to come spend an hour with us and educate us as city council about the things that we can do to help him. Because I know I've talked to Brian Malone. I know Brian's working pretty hard to support Pete. I know from a budget standpoint, they're working their way through, but I don't want to conjecture what Pete is getting or not getting. Let's let Brian and Pete have that discussion.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's something that you're right. It's going to be up to the legislature, whatever they decide.
Well, it's Brian Malone. He's the chancellor of the Texas State University system. Okay, he's the one who works the budgets back with Pete on what the requirements. He's the one that supported the nursing program coming back in. And without facts and data, I think we are spending a lot of time on a subject that we know nothing about. Let's see how that's up. Certainly the legislature has to support it, and that's what's gone in from a legislation standpoint. And there's pros and cons, whether it's part of Texas State University or A&M. I'm not an expert. I have no idea, and I don't think anyone in this room does.
No.
Part of our role, in my view, of council is to say, should we support Solaris University? The answer to me is unequivocally yes. Should we invite Pete Diego to come participate in this strategic discussion about the role between the city and the university? Unequivocally yes. Beyond that, I don't think we will.
I agree.
Not being bashful.
All right, so going through the healthcare discussion. What are other topics that when we think about from a prioritization and a city strategy perspective?
Transportation. One of the biggest things that bothers me, I've got some business activities I'm working on right now, so I'm on the road every morning now at 7:40. What a pain in the rear it is driving out on 7:40 in the morning. It's all the traffic going through town. And we talked about this when Chris Weber came in. We've got a transportation committee. We council need to get our transportation committee filled up. And we need it with some qualified people who understand transportation. And as I sent you, Eric, and for the rest of the council information, we need facts and data. We have no idea how many trucks roll through our town every day, whether it's on 118 north south or 6790 going east west. We need some data. Because all I know is when I sit over at West Texas National Bank for some transaction on over there more than I'd like to nowadays, I'm amazed at the number of 18-wheelers hitting East Avenue and 5th and come up to that stop sign to make that left turn because they're heading south 118 or they're heading east. And in less than an hour, it's at least 5 or 6. And I also live on Loop Road. And on Loop Road, I watch the number going through there. So they're going that way and they're going around. We have a lot of trucks going through. I don't think we have any action. So we got, and even if the county won't pay for it, I don't know what those things cost, but I think we, the city, ought to make some investment. I think the county ought to pay for it. There's another partnership. Because I don't think the county would want to know as well, because together we are really interested in transportation. Because Chris has got to fix all these roads. And we got to worry about how we can get people to and from where they want it. So in the afternoon, 14. Oh, I'm sorry, there's an expert. We got one on council.
Is this something you can help work back on pulling the data? And I've asked Chris, I know Chris has pulled in a lot of different directions, but really pulling that traffic volume data. You've got some good friends still that can pull that data for us. That would be immensely helpful. And then I think your engagement on that transportation committee be plugged in with that, with your experience would really be necessary. Yeah, and if there's some folks that you know that worked in TxDOT or worked in, some supporting industries on the transportation that would be interested in serving on the committee and could really provide some guidance there, they would be great people to join the committee, and they don't have to live in each respective ward. I think they just have to be within 10, 15 miles of the city limits. And that type of think tank would be super helpful. So we'll put that on your shoulder. Is that okay? To help us with that?
I'll check around, maybe that's a friend's district, that's a transportation departments.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Because I see it when I walk. I see the volume. I walk probably the loop 5 mornings a week. Even at 6:30, 6:45, there's several 18-wheelers passing over there. And they're going north and south is what they're doing. That's northeast. And I think if at a federal level, we see more stimulus dollars designed to go after the infrastructure projects, my guess is that volume will accelerate by 15-20% from the trend we're seeing now. Would be my guess.
I really think what this council wants to accomplish is which council members will support which council commissions. Here, because your expertise, you're working on transportation, you're already on. I think that's what we said. I'm not sure the others, but it's football really that deep. It goes back to the discussion we had earlier when we started this. When should council meet? And when do those boards meet? I think it's the right discussion, but also think it's important, a dialogue, all of that. As long as the complaint that, well, if council meets during the day, people can't participate. Well, the city's got business to go off and work, and commissions for other needs during the day, so I don't see that issue. It really is a full dialogue.
And the old model that the city operated under before going, well, and even really to the council manager form of government, there were aldermen, and each alderman had a specific activity that they focused on relative to the city. And I think it's pushing back to that sort of line and saying, what are our key, 5 or 6 boards, commissions, and each council member having an assignment, leading that much the same as Maria leads the animal advisory board and full sector together. Transportation. And, I think we can put some thought into planning and zoning. That's going to be a significant investment. I know we have our Parks Board chair attending the meeting.
There you go. Yep. Well, and in that case, with our Parks Board, my put is, you don't need a member of council to necessarily participate in that because you've got a strong leader. And I think that's part of the discussion. We've got strong leadership, strong domain expertise, which is what that's about.
Right.
then I think, then council can do it, but I think council needs to think about that on an annual basis, and they can say, where's the domain expertise, where's the interest in having to correct the issue?
You know what words are, required to do that? There's a, right?
All yours, all
Just
yours,
mine?
all yours, that's it.
Oh, okay. Because I'm on some other boards too that's required, but they're not. I mean, like I'm on the library board and the board for the
Family crisis center.
That was a good one, that's so that's.
Okay.
So you can do this, so we volunteer.
And they don't,
You must have not been here that day.
yeah, I think the library and the family crisis center have always had a city council member. I think it comes down to council's desire to find council member, if you want to designate a person on the staff or the person to respond to that.
So another area I think council needs to spend some time thinking about is utility infrastructure sustainment, like the use that. And what topic area, when we talk about potentially, federal dollars during the shovel-ready jobs, in my mind, our predecessors missed a huge opportunity to replace all the water, sewer, and gas lines under East Avenue E and Holland Avenue. Completely missed it. I mean, like, and as I think about the challenge that our city has, we're doing a great job on the above ground stuff, but we got to worry about the below ground stuff. Because we know we still have clay sewer lines. Well, I've seen them. Sure, when I leave them and we've been out there, they have up and clay sewer lines. I mean, these are the old clay sewer lines, not the new clay sewer lines, the old clay sewer lines that were put in the 40s. They're still there.
The Orangeburg, when steel was a premium,
Yeah, yeah.
they were building the Orangeburg line.
Yeah, and so I worry, and thinking about what Scott has to worry about the utilities infrastructure, about sewer management and water management. It's not a question of if, it's a question of how long will they last. Council made some decisions about getting inventory done. We committed some dollars to go work that under the tax system. The picture of working on a legal suit on that one, but I still think it's the right thing to do to get an assessment of where it's at and what our priorities ought to be, getting the GIS system put in place. Scott's exactly the right guy, because you got, in my mind, the right team in place to go work that. I think council needs to know what that is.
It'd be so helpful for, future councils and to have that information laid out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because like there won't be enough money to get it all done. It will not be. But how do you methodically work your highest priorities and move it?
Yeah, and part of the work we have in front of Scott right now, is working back with Jacob Martin, the engineering team that we are now using, and that is a robust 5-year infrastructure plan that we can look at. But a lot of that is going to be collection of water and how we're pulling that into our tanks. Yep. The base infrastructure throughout the community is going to be something that over time will have to continue to be looked at. And what techniques are coming out. I was reading up this past week on and talking to Scott on what's called slip lining, and that's growing in relevance across the country, where they're taking, for lack of a better term, it's like a sleeve that they're pulling through, typically pipes that are 8 inches and greater, and then they'll push another element through that will either expand it with water or expand it with air, and then seal some of the old pipe infrastructure. The tensile strength of it seems to be equivalent to what we would see in a brand new pipe. And what the city of LA is starting to do more and more of this. Fort Worth has done some of this. And it's really for main intersections that they don't want to have to pull up the road. Because we know if we dig the pipe up and put it in, it doesn't matter how much we compact, you never get a level fill on it. It always depresses over time. So if you can slip line it and get that same effect and potentially allow that infrastructure to last 30 to 40 more years. And something Scott and I talked about in depth last week, can we start identifying some routes as well and building that in? Now, it does take a contractor to do that work, but if you had 12 runs, 150, 200, 300 foot runs that you wanted to do it, you could bring somebody in, batch it as a single contract.
So is it like what Randy does in this in terms of replacing the gas lines?
Well, he's in div, he's doing straight steel to poly pipe.
I understand you're doing that, but from a conceptual standpoint, the strategy would be to pick out the priority list to go through. Randy's got that on staff. Whether or not a contractor has to do that or not, I mean, part of it, you look and say, where's the business trade-off?
Right.
To make a capital investment in the equipment and all that, if we do that over say a 20-year run.
Right.
Because that's part of the city's business.
Right.
To work that.
Right.
Sewer and water.
You can work that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. To your point, yes, it is, should be part of our div as it relates to water, wastewater.
Yeah.
And layering that in instead of dig and replace.
Yeah.
How do we slip line as much as we can where it makes sense.
Oh, that's very cool.
And there's just not a lot of application vendors out there that are actually doing it.
Yep.
And once again, another good business model, right? If you were somebody out of Odessa or Fort Stockton or Pecos or Alpine, and you learned how to do this.
Yeah.
And you just started making calls all across.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Tell Tony.
Hey, Tony's coming up with it. Tony's employees, it's Tony's
Well, whatever.
Get yourself a 3 or 4 man crew. And
Yeah.
You could really.
Get people to work their project.
Well.
It's too crazy.
No, yeah. Yeah, just.
Burn people out. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. That's way awesome.
There's actually some really good videos out there if you're ever interested on YouTube on Slipline. So have Tony watch that.
I'm gonna bring it up because like I know I watch it all day.
He probably.
I know what you're talking about.
But it is a way for us to really think about our sewer infrastructure, so part of what Scott and I talk about a lot is when it rains, where do we have insertion points?
Yes.
Because when we're tracking the daily gallons that are going out to the wastewater treatment plant, we know every time it rains, it goes up.
Yep.
Now, are those manholes that it's running into, or is this cracks and leaks within the infrastructure that's absorbing that? And those certainly are options for us.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
So your flow goes up when it rains. A lot of it's going to be coming out of my neck of the woods, 4 or 5. You have a huge downpour there.
largest volume I ever saw one day, this was anecdotal, Virgil Clark had said, yeah, we had 1 million gallons coming in. Woo! And normally we see, 330 to 400,000 gallons. But to be, it was one of those major deluges that came down, but we had some level of significant breaches within the system to collect that amount of water. Heavy rain. Now, the loops, the waste that's coming in, which is good,
Yep.
add more oxygen, but
Wow. Wow.
good. Well, Well, we'll keep that as a focus point too. Let me see, from a time check, we're at 13 till. Any other topics?
I actually have a question here from Laura Gold.
Okay.
It says, with regard to qualifications for boards and commissions, are there job descriptions? What are the terms and conditions? Are there minimum qualifications and certification requirements? And does the city provide professional training and guidance?
Let's see. The mapping out of skills and abilities needed for the respective boards. So that will be an action item that I will take and bring back to council and work on that very quickly. Specifically the P&Z, I'd like to have that ready for next council meeting so that we can discuss, and then we'll systematically, where they can look at the animal advisory board, touch up any skills and qualifications.
Well, that's something that we had done a while back, and I thought that we'd already done this and passed it through city council, but it was so long, it was 2019. So, but we can't find it. Cynthia wasn't able to find it, so I do have some suggestions that other than that, we've already worked it through animal advisory.
So Eric, I have the package I used to do like every other year from a council perspective. I'll just give you all that. The basics there is what are the legal requirements, what are the charters for all the boards and show all the ordinances. In my mind, that's the first the first step to get everyone up to speed on what are the qualification forms and everything else. What we're talking about goes beyond that, which is that next number. So I'll get some. Okay.
So these have been looked at and we're not duplicating, everything that we have right now, of course, is what we need. But we have a pretty, Dave is pretty strong on building and all that, like is the building standard still needing it? I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying, has that been looked at? And what we have is what we need.
So with our building inspector right now, we don't per se need the Building and Standards Commission. I think what we're going to see from our new municipal judge is a push to go back to a court of record. When we go to a court of record, then council might want to consider a board of adjustments. That could potentially, not the same as a Building and Standards Commission, but they are quasi-judicial, the board of adjustment is. And that is typically on requests for a zoning type change or a variance. And I have to look back at the state language around the board of adjustment again too. But it's something that Jody has talked about a little bit and David has talked about a little bit too. I think right now, our main focus really needs to be on planning and zoning because we have so many other points around that. My sense is, with getting Martine engaged on the transportation as well, we've got 2 members there. We could find 5 other qualified. That would provide good structure. Our Parks Board is running effectively. Our Animal Advisory Board is running effectively right now. Our Airport Advisory Board, that's something that Abel and Scott and I have been talking about, how he then will start leading those discussions. They wanted to talk more about finances and less about airport assurances. And so I think as we look at mapping out the skills and abilities on the airport, that's going to be something that we're going to need to reframe. Environmental services,
It hasn't met.
they just haven't met.
Well, part of the reason they haven't met, there hasn't been someone on council to go work with. So they've struggled with that. I think Adeline is your right person to go work with. I think there's a good question about whether building and standards should stick around and whether the environmental board should stick around.
What about the music committee? What exactly is?
The environmental one?
No, the music committee, what exactly is that too?
Well, the music committee is all about, that's the music and tourism one, about bringing business in, so it's more from the tourist perspective.
Yeah, to get the
Is that
designation.
a
to be
lot what, like what Heather's doing though?
Well, no, but in order to get designation as a music-friendly city, you had to have these.
Oh,
So this was,
And they're a full board, they meet twice a year, that's all the state requires to meet the designation, and they're all happy on that. And there's not really decisions for them to make, but we just want that designation.
but I think frankly, they'll understand it, they have to ask whether we keep that, whether we keep the environmental board or not.
What does the environmental board do?
It was really aimed at the time looking at what are the environmental issues going on in Alpine. So in theory, could you manage water better? Could you look at the environmental implications from a long-term perspective? And
Are there ordinances related to that?
it's really about water management.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And my sense is at this point, I would just probably leave it on in the ordinances, and council can make a decision not to fill the roles. And if they find a need for it in the future, you don't need to get recreated. It hasn't met and it struggles with mission about how to go work it. Frankly, we tried to push it to go worry about long-term environmental water conservation, and it just didn't get traction. So, that'd be my take. But I think one of the things council ought to do is look all up and say, which ones you want to walk ball, which ones you want to keep.
There might be some active people in the ones that like the environmental.
Right, there might be a person or two.
Yeah, but
on
they
there.
might, we could use somewhere else that's willing to put in the time, but right now they're just stagnant because nothing's being done.
I agree.
We might have somebody on building standards that's interested in finding something.
Yep.
All right, any other thoughts, questions? I think it's very productive. I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sheets of notes to type up and get to you all by maybe Thursday. If you're okay with that.
No hurry.
Well, good. Well, I really appreciate the dialogue today. This has been wonderful. We haven't really done this, but I think for me, it's been very effective. So I hope for all of you, it's been effective.
As a new member, it has. I learned a lot today.
It's a good presentation, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
How
Thanks.
often do you hold these workshops? Twice a year?
This was our first one, and I'm really, as productive as this was today, I'm honestly thinking that the budget workshop is going to be more like this.
Yes.
Because everybody seems comfortable, everybody really seems engaged in sharing ideas. So I'll do, we'll just do it twice a year, every 6 months. We'll do it for the budget, and then we'll do it right as we get into the new year.
Be awesome.
Great. Awesome. Well, Mayor, we can take a 30-minute break. People can, go on mute if they want, and have a quick bite to eat and start back up at 5:30. Will that work?
Okay, that'll work. It's what, 5 o'clock right now or 4:57?
Yes, sir.
So we'll just take a 30-minute recess.
Great.
Okay.
And anybody who would like a sandwich, there is a little sandwich over there.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna put us on mute here, okay?